My parents threatened to kick me out if I didn't fund my sister's rent, so I exposed the truth, and their perfect life fell apart overnight. They always said family comes first, but I didn't realize that meant I'd be expected to sacrifice my dreams for my sister's lies. My name is Isla Thompson, I'm 19 years old, and I'm a freshman journalism major at State University. Well, I was until a week ago when everything fell apart. Looking back now, our house on Maple Street was like something straight out of a magazine. White picket fence, rose bushes that Mom tended religiously every weekend, and a lawn so green it practically glowed. From the outside, we were the picture of suburban success, the kind of family that neighbors pointed to as an example of doing it right. Dad, Robert Thompson, was 52 and had worked his way up to senior financial advisor at First National Bank. Every morning, he'd emerge from the house in one of his perfectly pressed button-downs and conservative ties, briefcase in hand, looking like the embodiment of fiscal responsibility. He loved talking about smart investments, long-term planning, and building generational wealth. Ironic, considering what I know now about how he actually managed our family's finances. Mom, Linda, was 50 and taught English at the local high school, where she'd built a reputation as one of those teachers students either loved or feared. She had this way of making everything sound like a life lesson, constantly dropping quotes about perseverance and the transformative power of education. Our dinner conversations were filled with her stories about students who'd overcome obstacles through hard work and determination. She genuinely believed that success was just a matter of applying yourself and making good choices. Then there was Madison, 24, blonde, effortlessly charming, and absolutely untouchable in our parents' eyes. She was like the sun in our family's solar system, with the rest of us revolving around her moods, her needs, her endless stream of drama and crises. Madison had this gift for making every room she entered feel more exciting, more alive, and our parents were completely enchanted by her charisma. She could walk into the house after disappearing for weeks, spin some elaborate story about her latest adventure or misfortune, and they'd hang on every word like she was delivering the evening news. I learned early that being the good daughter meant being invisible. While Madison got new clothes for every season, I wore hand-me-downs and saved my birthday money. While she got a brand new car for graduation, I worked summers at the local diner to buy my own beat-up Honda. While she moved out at 18 with full financial support, I stayed home, saved every penny, and worked part-time jobs throughout high school to build my college fund. I can still remember the exact moment I deposited that final $100 bill into my college savings account, $15,000 in total. 4 grueling years of my life condensed into that number. Countless Friday nights spent babysitting the Henderson twins, while my classmates went to parties. Summer days that started at 5 a.m. serving coffee and pancakes to cranky customers at Murphy's Diner. Coming home with my feet aching and my hair smelling like bacon grease. Weekend afternoons tutoring 7th graders in algebra, watching their faces light up when equations finally clicked, while I mentally calculated how much closer each session brought me to my goal. Every single dollar in that account had a purpose, a destination already mapped out in the detailed spreadsheet I'd created freshman year. Tuition, textbooks, meal plans, dorm fees, emergency fund. It was all calculated down to the last penny. This wasn't just money to me. It was freedom, independence, the key to finally escaping the suffocating dynamics of my family and building something that was entirely mine. Journalism school wasn't just a dream, it was my carefully planned escape route. My parents loved to brag about their responsible youngest daughter to anyone who would listen. At family gatherings, Dad would beam while telling relatives about my work ethic and savings discipline. Mom would add how mature I was compared to other teenagers, how I never asked for anything, never caused any trouble. But lately, those compliments were starting to feel less like praise and more like expectations wrapped in pretty words. Responsible meant they never had to worry about me. Mature meant I could handle whatever they threw my way without complaint. The warning signs had been there for months, but I'd gotten so good at ignoring family drama that I almost missed them entirely. 3 months ago, everything started unraveling when Madison's voice came crackling through the speakerphone one Tuesday evening, tears and hysteria painting her words as she sobbed about her rent situation. She'd been living in this ridiculously expensive loft downtown. Exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of place that screamed, "I have money," even when you clearly didn't. For someone working 20 hours a week folding clothes at some boutique, the rent alone was financial suicide. Any reasonable parent would have suggested downsizing, maybe moving back home temporarily, or finding a second job to make ends meet. Instead, my parents immediately shifted into rescue mode, their voices taking on that familiar tone of concerned urgency that always appeared whenever Madison needed saving. Again, that's when I started paying attention to the pattern I'd somehow missed before. The mysterious car repairs they'd paid for when Madison's vehicle was repossessed for missed payments. The emergency medical bills that coincided with her weekend trips to Atlantic City. The temporary loan of $3,000 last Christmas that was never mentioned again. My parents had been quietly funding Madison's lifestyle for years, while I scraped together change for textbooks. I tried to push down the growing resentment. Family helps family, right? That's what they always said. But watching my parents stress about their own bills while continuing to bail out Madison made my stomach turn. I started keeping track, writing down every emergency and every check they wrote. The numbers were staggering. The tension in our house became suffocating. Dad would come home from work with deep lines around his eyes, and Mom would spend hours on the phone with Madison, her voice alternating between soothing and exasperated. They never asked how my classes were going or if I needed anything. All their energy was focused on their precious eldest daughter and her never-ending crises. I should have seen it coming, but when they cornered me in the kitchen that Tuesday evening, I was still caught off guard. Madison had been staying with us for 2 weeks, claiming her landlord was harassing her about late rent. She sat at our dining table with red-rimmed eyes, playing the victim perfectly while my parents flanked me like I was on trial. "Isla, we need to talk," Dad said, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he used when he was about to make a unilateral decision. "Your sister needs help, and as a family, we all need to step up." Mom nodded solemnly, her teacher voice in full effect. "Madison is going through a really difficult time right now. The landlord is threatening eviction, and she needs $15,000 to catch up on rent and put down a deposit on a new place." I felt the blood drain from my face. 15,000? That's my entire college fund. "Exactly," Dad said, as if this was the most reasonable thing in the world. "You have the money just sitting there, and your sister needs it now. You can always take out student loans or apply for more scholarships." The casual way he dismissed 4 years of my hard work and sacrifice made me dizzy. "But that money is for my education. I've been saving since I was 15, and now you can use it to help your family," Mom interrupted. "This is what families do for each other, Isla. We sacrifice for the people we love." Madison finally spoke up, her voice quivering with practiced emotion. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. I'll pay you back, I promise, as soon as I get back on my feet." I looked around the room at these 3 people who were supposed to love and protect me, and all I saw were strangers asking me to light my future on fire. "I can't do this. That money is for my tuition, my books, my living expenses. Without it, I'd have to drop out." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dad's face hardened, and Mom's expression shifted from pleading to cold disappointment. "I can't believe how selfish you're being right now," Mom said, her voice sharp with judgment. "Your sister is about to be homeless, and you're worried about money you're not even using? Money I'm not using? I'm using it for college. It's literally paying for my education right now." Dad stood up, towering over me with crossed arms. "If you're not willing to help your family when they need you most, then maybe you should reconsider whether this family is willing to help you." The threat hung in the air like smoke. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What does that mean?" "It means," Mom said coldly, "that if you're too selfish to help your sister, then maybe you're old enough to handle your own living expenses too. You have until Friday to decide." They left me standing in the kitchen, shaking with rage and disbelief. Madison avoided eye contact as she followed them out, but I caught the smallest smirk on her face before she turned away. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about power, control, and keeping me in my place as the family's designated sacrificial lamb. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom surrounded by journalism awards and college acceptance letters, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to roll over and let them destroy my future. I was going to fight back. The next morning, I started documenting everything. As a journalism major, I knew the power of evidence, and I was going to gather every piece I could find. I took screenshots of every text message, every email, every social media post that revealed the truth about my family's dynamics. I recorded phone conversations using an app on my phone, carefully staying within legal boundaries since our state allowed one-party consent recording. What I discovered over the next few days made my stomach sick. Madison wasn't just irresponsible with money. She had a serious gambling problem. Her social media was full of photos from casinos, poker games, and horse racing tracks. The rent money wasn't for rent at all. It was to pay off gambling debts to some very unfriendly people who had been calling and texting her with increasingly threatening messages. I found bank statements that my parents had carelessly left in their home office. Over the past 3 years, they had given Madison over $40,000 in loans that were never repaid. Money that could have been their retirement fund, their emergency savings, their security. Instead, it had all been fed into my sister's addiction while they praised me for being so responsible with money. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. This wasn't about family loyalty or helping someone in need. This was about enabling destructive behavior while sacrificing the future of the child who had actually worked hard and made good choices. I was being punished for Madison's failures, and my parents were too blinded by favoritism to see it. Friday came, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. I found my parents in the living room, watching television like it was any normal evening. Madison was at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with the casual indifference of someone who assumed she'd already won. "I've made my decision," I announced, my voice steadier than I felt. Dad muted the TV and turned to face me. "And? I'm not giving Madison my college fund." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face went through several expressions before settling on cold fury. "Then I guess you've made your choice about where your priorities lie." "Yes, I have. My priority is my education and my future, not enabling someone who's been lying to all of us." Madison's head snapped up from her phone. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshots I'd gathered. "I'm talking about the fact that you don't need rent money, Madison. You need gambling debt money. I'm talking about the photos of you at 3 different casinos this month, while you've been crying about being broke. I'm talking about the threatening messages from loan sharks that you've been hiding." The color drained from Madison's face, but my parents looked skeptical rather than shocked. "Those could be from anyone," Dad said dismissively. "Your sister wouldn't lie about something this serious." I played one of the recorded phone calls I'd captured. Madison talking to someone about placing bets and discussing payment plans for money she owed. Then I showed them the bank records I'd photographed, highlighting every loan they'd given her over the years. $43,000, I said, watching their faces as the numbers sank in. "That's how much you've given her in the past 3 years alone. Money that's never been paid back. Money that's gone straight into feeding her addiction while she manipulates you into feeling sorry for her." Madison stood up abruptly, her mask finally slipping. "You little spy! You had no right to go through my private messages, and you had no right to lie to our parents and try to steal my future to pay for your gambling debts." The room erupted into chaos. Madison was screaming about privacy and betrayal. Mom was yelling at me for attacking my sister, and Dad was demanding to see more evidence. In the middle of it all, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to keep the peace or make everyone happy. I was standing up for myself. "I'm done," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "I'm not giving you my money, and I'm not going to stand here and be guilt-tripped for refusing to enable Madison's gambling addiction. If that makes me selfish in your eyes, then so be it." Dad's face was red with anger. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to walk back in. We're done supporting someone who won't support their own family." "Good," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Because I'm done being the only one in this family who's expected to sacrifice everything while Madison gets rewarded for her failures." I went upstairs, packed my essentials, and called my best friend Sarah to ask if I could stay with her family for a while. Her parents, who had always treated me like a second daughter, didn't hesitate to say yes. As I loaded my car with boxes of my belongings, none of my family members came out to stop me or say goodbye. The first few days at Sarah's house were a blur of hurt and anger. I kept expecting my phone to ring with an apology, some acknowledgement that they'd been wrong to choose Madison's lies over my truth. Instead, I got a few passive-aggressive texts from Mom about how disappointed they were in my selfishness and how Madison was devastated by my betrayal. That's when I decided to stop playing by their rules entirely. I spent the weekend crafting a Facebook post that would change everything. As a journalism student, I knew how to tell a story that would resonate with people. I included screenshots of the threatening messages Madison had received from creditors, photos of the bank statements showing years of loans, and recordings of my parents threatening to kick me out for refusing to fund my sister's gambling addiction. But I didn't just dump the evidence and walk away. I told the whole story: the years of favoritism, the double standards, the expectation that I should sacrifice my future for someone who refused to take responsibility for their choices. I wrote about what it felt like to be the good daughter who was taken for granted, and how devastating it was to realize that my parents valued keeping Madison happy more than protecting my future. I ended the post with a simple statement: I was taught that family comes first, but I've learned that sometimes you have to come first for yourself, especially when your family is willing to sacrifice your dreams to enable someone else's destructive choices. I hit publish at 8 p.m. on Sunday night and went to bed, not sure what to expect. I woke up to my phone buzzing non-stop. The post had been shared over 200 times overnight, with hundreds of comments from friends, extended family members, neighbors, and even strangers who had been tagged by people who knew my family. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. My high school teachers were commenting about how proud they were of me for standing up for myself. Neighbors were sharing their own stories about watching Madison's entitled behavior over the years. Extended family members were admitting they'd suspected something was wrong with how my parents treated us differently, but hadn't known how to address it. But the comments that hit hardest were from my parents' colleagues and friends. Several teachers who worked with Mom wrote about their disappointment in seeing her treat her own daughter this way. Dad's coworkers from the bank were sharing the post with comments about hypocrisy and poor financial judgment. The post had gone viral in our small community, and everyone was talking about it. By Tuesday morning, the fallout was in full swing. Mom called in sick to work after several parents requested their children be moved out of her classes. Dad was called into a meeting with his supervisor about the negative attention his family drama was bringing to the bank. Madison, who had finally been forced to confess about her gambling debts, lost her retail job when her employer saw the post and decided they didn't want someone with financial integrity issues handling their register. The phone calls started that afternoon: first Mom, crying and begging me to take the post down. Then Dad, alternating between anger and attempts at manipulation. Finally Madison, screaming about how I'd ruined her life and demanding I fix this mess. But I didn't take the post down. Instead, I turned off my phone and focused on the future I was building for myself. The community response was beyond anything I could have imagined. 3 local business owners reached out to offer me part-time jobs. A retired journalist who had seen my post offered to mentor me and help me build my portfolio. 2 different families offered to let me stay with them rent-free while I finished school. Most surprisingly, a scholarship foundation that supported students from dysfunctional families reached out after seeing my story. They offered me a full scholarship covering not just tuition, but living expenses too. For the first time in weeks I cried, but these were tears of relief and hope instead of hurt and anger. The local newspaper, where I'd applied for an internship months earlier and been turned down, called to offer me a paid position writing human interest stories. Your Facebook post showed more journalistic integrity and storytelling ability than most of our staff writers, the editor told me. We'd be honored to have you on our team. 6 months later, I'm living in a small apartment near campus, working part-time at the newspaper, and maintaining a 4 gigapascals in my journalism program. My scholarship covers all my educational expenses, and my job provides enough income for rent and living costs. For the first time in my life, I'm truly independent, and it feels incredible. My parents made a few more attempts at reconciliation, but only after it became clear that the community backlash wasn't going away. Mom was eventually transferred to a different school after too many parents complained about her judgment and character. Dad lost several clients who decided they didn't trust their financial planning to someone who made such poor decisions with his own family's money. Madison's story took a different turn. The public exposure of her gambling addiction was actually the wake-up call she needed. She entered a treatment program, got a job at a grocery store, and slowly started paying back the money she owed. She sent me a letter a few months ago apologizing for her behavior and thanking me for exposing the truth that everyone had been too afraid to confront. I haven't responded yet. I'm still processing years of hurt and manipulation, and I'm not ready to let her back into my life just because she's finally taking responsibility. Maybe someday we'll have a relationship again, but it will have to be built on honesty and mutual respect, not the dysfunctional dynamic we grew up with. The biggest lesson I learned from this whole experience is that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones most willing to sacrifice your happiness for their own comfort. My parents loved the idea of having a responsible, low-maintenance daughter who would always put family first, but they didn't love me enough to protect my future when it conflicted with their golden child's immediate needs. I also learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, even when people try to make you feel guilty for having boundaries. Especially when those people have spent years benefiting from your lack of boundaries. The community support I received showed me what real family looks like. People who celebrate your successes, protect your dreams, and hold you accountable without enabling destructive behavior. I found that family in Sarah's parents, who treated me with more love and respect in 1 month than my biological family showed me in 19 years. I found it in the mentors who invested in my potential, the scholarship committee who believed in my worth, and the editor who gave me a chance to prove myself. My biological family taught me that blood doesn't automatically create loyalty, love, or obligation. The family I've chosen taught me what those things actually look like when they're genuine. I still drive past my childhood home sometimes when I'm visiting Sarah's family. The lawn is still perfectly manicured, the house still looks picture perfect from the outside. But I know now that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the most toxic situations come wrapped in the most normal-looking packages. I don't hate my parents or even Madison anymore. Anger is exhausting, and I need my energy for building the life I want, rather than dwelling on the life I escaped. But I also don't miss the constant stress of trying to earn love from people who had already decided I was worth less than my sister's temporary comfort. Today, I'm working on a series of articles about financial abuse within families and the long-term psychological effects of parental favoritism. My editor thinks it has the potential to be picked up by national publications, which could launch my career in a way I never imagined possible when I was 17 and saving quarters in a mason jar. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just given them the money. If I'd taken out student loans, dropped out of school, or spent the next decade trying to rebuild what I'd sacrificed for Madison's gambling debts, I probably would have stayed trapped in that cycle forever, always hoping that the next sacrifice would finally earn me the love and respect I deserved. Instead, I chose to value myself enough to say no. I chose to demand better treatment, even when it meant losing the only family I'd ever known. I chose to build a life based on my own worth rather than my usefulness to other people. It wasn't easy, and there are still nights when I feel the ache of missing the parents I wish I'd had instead of the ones I actually got. But I've never regretted choosing myself over their dysfunction. The last conversation I had with my mother was 3 weeks ago when she called to tell me that several people at her new school had seen my articles online and asked if I was her daughter. I told them yes, she said quietly, and that I was proud of you. It was the first time she'd ever said those words to me, and they came years too late to heal the damage she'd caused. But maybe that's okay. Maybe some relationships can't be repaired, and maybe that's not always a tragedy. I'm learning that you don't have to forgive people who hurt you just because they're family. You don't have to sacrifice your dreams to maintain relationships with people who don't value your happiness. And you don't have to keep setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Family should be the people who celebrate your successes, support your dreams, and love you not for what you can give them, but for who you are. If the people who share your DNA can't do that, then you have every right to find people who can. I'm 20 years old now, and I'm building a life that would have been impossible if I'd stayed trapped in that toxic dynamic. I have mentors who believe in my potential, friends who celebrate my achievements, and a career path that excites me every single day. I have my own apartment, my own income, and my own choices about how to spend my time and energy. Most importantly, I have my self-respect. I have the knowledge that I'm strong enough to walk away from people who don't value me, even when they're family. I have the confidence that comes from choosing my own worth over other people's comfort. My parents always said family comes first, but they never taught me that I'm part of that family too. They never showed me that my dreams, my future, and my happiness mattered just as much as anyone else's. I had to learn that lesson on my own, and it was the most valuable education I ever received. Now when people ask me about family loyalty, I tell them that real loyalty goes both ways. It means protecting each other's dreams, not sacrificing one person's future for another person's mistakes. It means accountability, not enablement. It means love that empowers rather than love that diminishes. I learned that family isn't about blood or obligation, or keeping the peace at any cost. It's about mutual respect, genuine care, and the willingness to do what's best for each other, even when it's difficult. The family that raised me taught me to be small, compliant, and grateful for scraps of attention. The family I chose taught me to be bold, confident, and deserving of genuine love and respect. I know which lesson I'll carry forward, and I know which kind of family I'll build when it's my turn to love and protect the next generation. Breaking cycles of dysfunction isn't easy, but it's possible, and it's worth every difficult conversation, every burned bridge, and every moment of uncertainty along the way. They always said family comes first, but I learned to put myself first when my family wouldn't, and that decision saved my life.